Welcome everyone to our workshop today on managing emerging risks and workers' compensation. Before we commence, I would like to acknowledge the Tasmanian Aboriginal people as the traditional owners of this land and pay my respects to elders past and present. My name is Bronwyn Kidd. I'm the Program Manager at Business Tasmania, and I'm joined today by Mikala from the Tasmanian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. I'm going to give you a short overview of the Business Tasmania service and what we do here. So Business Tasmania exists to help Tasmanian small business owners to start, run and grow their business. We're a statewide service with who anyone operating or intending to operate a business in Tasmania can contact us, and we'll do our best to help. One of the great things about the Business Tasmania service is our helpline. So you can give us a call anytime, Monday to Friday, 9 till 5, with any business related question, and it's our job to connect you with the most suitable services that are available to you. And one of the great things is most of the services that we refer you to are free and government funded. So perhaps you need help with something like starting a business, accessing advice services, marketing. You may have questions around running your business more efficiently, or perhaps you just want to know what free support is available or grant programs. But really no question is too silly. And if you're unsure, just give our team a call and we'll do our best to find the support for you. We also host a range of events and workshops throughout the year, and we have a comprehensive calendar of events on our website for not only Business Tasmania events, but also other government-supported events running for Tasmanian businesses specifically. So if you head to our website and click on the events tab, you'll be able to see all the events either in your area or the ones that are hosted online for everybody to access. We also have a very comprehensive website with some fantastic resources and tools on there. We have a grant and funding finder tool to help you find the most recent funding programs. And then we also have a support and resources finder tool where you can find resources to help you on various topics of business. And we have an advice service called the Tasmanian Business Advice Service, and another service called the New Business Support Service. And these allow you to access a few hours with an experienced business advisor to get generalist support for your business. And it's completely tailored to you. So you can go to see an advisor with all sorts of questions. Some common ones are things like business planning, financial forecasting and budgeting. Perhaps you need support around your strategy or perhaps your systems. There's really no limit, but our advisors are generalist and they each have different experiences and different backgrounds, and on our website you can see the different biographies of each of them and the different skills that they may have and be able to help your business with. So if you've had an ABN for 12 months or more, you can access up to 5 hours of support through the Tasmanian Business Advice Service. And if you're just starting out, perhaps you don't have an ABN yet, but want to register one, or you've had an ABN for up to 12 months, then you can access 2 hours of support through the New Business Support Service. And you can access the service either online with any advisor across Tasmania, or you can meet face-to-face with your advisor from your area. So you can head to the Tasmanian Business Advice Service website, businessadvice.tas.gov.au, to see a list of the advisors available to you. And if you prefer to speak to someone via phone, you can call the Business Tasmania team on 1800 440 026 to get in contact, and we will sign you up over the phone. All right, the last resource I have for you is our event calendar that I mentioned before. So you can find this on our website, and it has a list of all the events we are hosting. Coming up this month, we have one more event in this series, the Cost of Doing Business series, and that is next Tuesday, the 30th of June, on setting the right price for your product or service. And to connect with us, you can give us a call on 1800 440 026 and ask any business related question, and we'll do our best to find the support to help you. Or you can also ask your question via email at ask@business.tas.gov.au. You can also follow us on socials. We've recently launched a LinkedIn, so we'd love to see you over on LinkedIn with us. And then finally, the best place to find out about any business news, perhaps new funding programs or support services, or any legislative changes that you need to be aware of as a small business owner, you can sign up to our weekly newsletter just on our website, and that is the best place to stay up to date. All right, and that is it from me. So I'll hand over to Mikala to dig into our topic for today.
Thanks so much, Bronwyn. Can you see my screen there okay?
I can, yes.
Beautiful, thank you. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. So my name's Mikala. I'm a Senior Business Advisor with the Tasmanian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. I do want to mention that I am not a workplace relations lawyer, but I do have one on staff, and I picked her brain quite extensively for this presentation. So at the end, if there are any questions that are way out of my scope, I do have some avenues to send you in to be able to get them answered. But hopefully I will cover a lot of information in this, so hopefully I will answer some of those questions right up front. So today we're talking about managing emerging workers' compensation risks. Now, according to WorkSafe Tasmania, around 7,500 workers get injured in Tasmania each year, and these injuries cost about 200 million in direct workers' compensation claims each year. And they're on the rise, primarily driven by a significant surge in psychological injury and mental health claims. So with that in mind, today's session is going to be about getting ahead of that from the point of view of culture and psychosocial hazards. So psychosocial hazards are important because they pose a direct and significant risk to an individual's mental and physical health. And what I want to do today is give you a practical understanding of what these hazards actually are, and more importantly, what you can do about them to mitigate these risks in your business. So let's start with culture, because it essentially underpins everything. The simplest definition I could find of culture is the way that we do things around here. So it's not your value statement up on the wall, it's what actually happens day to day on the ground in your business. And it's also about how your managers or your leaders treat their teams. So it's whether people feel comfortable raising a concern, whether good work gets noticed and recognised. And I'd invite you to hold the question on there, how would you describe the way you do things around your workplace in your mind as we go through today's session? Because a lot of the hazards we'll look at are essentially symptoms of culture problems in the workplace. And here's a positive case for getting workplace culture right. So when you establish trust, psychological safety, respect, and open communication, you don't just create a place that's much nicer to work in, you get real business outcomes. So that might look like better engagement from your employees, lower staff turnover, higher productivity. And the compliance case for managing psychosocial hazards is real, but also so is just the overall positive impact on your business, because happy workers create a happy environment for your clients and customers to come into. So workplace health and safety has traditionally focused on physical hazards. So the things that you can see and touch, wet floors, doors being blocked, all that sort of thing. Machinery, problems, chemicals, slips and falls. What's changed significantly in recent years, and particularly since Safe Work Australia updated the model work health and safety laws, is that psychological health is now given equal standing. And what that means is essentially employers have the same duty of care to manage workplace mental health risks as strictly as they do physical safety and health risks. So what exactly is a psychosocial hazard? So the formal definition is that they arise from or in relation to four things. So the design and management of work, the working environment, plant or equipment, and workplace interactions and behaviours. So in plain terms, what this means is they're the aspects of how work is organised and experienced in the workplace that can cause psychological harm. Now, to give you a bit of an example of how this works, psychosocial hazards essentially can create stress, and stress is the body's reaction when a worker perceives the demands of their work exceed their ability or their resources to cope. And what stress does is it creates a physiological and psychological response in the body by releasing adrenaline and cortisol. So it raises the heart rate and blood pressure, it boosts glucose levels in the bloodstream, and it diverts energy from the immune system to other areas of the body. So stress itself is not an injury, but if it becomes frequent and prolonged or severe enough, it can cause psychological and physical harm. So some hazards cause stress when a worker is exposed to the risk of the hazard occurring, as well as when they are directly exposed to the hazard itself. And what I mean by that, for example, is a worker is exposed to workplace violence, and they are likely to experience stress if they perceive that that risk has not been controlled, even if the violence doesn't occur again. So there's that psychological sort of loop in there still. So in this situation, the one I just described, despite the hazard rarely occurring, the stress itself may actually be a prolonged problem. So this is the full list of psychosocial hazards under the model work health and safety regulations. And it's worth pausing here because some might actually surprise you. So bullying and harassment are on here, as you would expect, but so are things like low job control, lack of role clarity, poor change management, and also inadequate reward and recognition. So these aren't sort of abstract fringe concerns. They're actually everyday workplace experiences that, when poorly managed, create real psychological risk in your workplace. So for small and medium businesses in particular, several of these, like job demands, poor support, and role clarity, are actually very commonly encountered. So this is the key connection that I really want you to take away. Psychosocial hazards and workplace culture are not separate problems. A business with a poor culture will almost inevitably have unaddressed psychosocial hazards, because it's the culture that determines whether people feel safe raising concerns, and also whether managers or leaders are supported to have the difficult conversations, and whether the business is able to respond when problems emerge. So you really can't fix one without the other. Now, I'm going to walk through the main hazard categories over the next several slides, and I do want to remind you that you will be receiving a copy of the slides after, so don't get too concerned about capturing all the information on the slides. They will be presented to you. But what I'd really rather you capture are any insights or just particular things that jump out at you that you hadn't thought of before in relation to all of this. So for each one that I bring up, there's a lot of information on the slides, but I'm going to give you a sense of what it looks like in practice and what the control measures or the things that you can actually do might look like. Some of these might feel really familiar to you, and others might make you think about your own business or workplace in a new way. Okay, so the first one is job demands. So some examples of job demands causing problems are sustained or intense high levels of physical, mental, or emotional effort. So again, it's not just physical, it's mental or emotional effort that's involved. So it could be someone who's working in a counsellor role. If they don't have the correct supports in place to support them or adequate breaks, that can be a real problem. Long, irregular, or unpredictable work hours, which can be a challenge when you've got staff working from home, as I know at least one of the people who are attending today has. Insufficient breaks, and again, this can be a work from home challenge, including a lack of recovery time between shifts if you've got shift workers. High workloads and time pressures. High mental or cognitive demands. High emotional demands, low job demands. So what I mean by this is long idle periods, so highly repetitive tasks with great spaces in between when people are just kind of going or wondering what they're going to do to fill their time. And idle periods with high workloads, but things that are unable to proceed until equipment, resources, or support become available. Or that can also be, you know, things can sometimes get caught in a bottleneck for approvals. That can also be another challenge when people have a lot of work to do, but they can't get through it because there are other things in their way. So some control measures that you can consider to try and overcome these problems. With regard to job and work design, you want to look at scheduling, managing your supply chain, and rostering. With a physical work environment, it's the design of the workplace or the layout, maybe providing quiet spaces for workers if they do need some downtime in between tasks, and also implementing systems to reduce human error. Modifying job demands, looking at the skill level of your staff, allocation of time to complete tasks. Again, rostering comes into it. Job rotation, if they're doing the same thing again and again, moving them between different stations or between jobs can be a great way of mixing it up. And also outsourcing. So, you know, are there some particularly repetitive tasks that it might be better to move away from your workforce that you could get other people external to do? Then you've got safe work systems and procedures. So empowering your employees with regular meetings, reviewing and updating policies and procedures around these things, and ensuring that you have in place a good system for them to use to escalate issues. And as far as the worker goes, you really need to ensure that you're setting achievable targets for the individuals on your team, that you're providing the appropriate training, you're ensuring applicants. So when you're in the I can't think of what it's called at the moment. I've got a brain fog. Recruitment, that's what it's called. When you're in the recruitment phase, ensuring that your applicants are aware of any emotional demands that might be required as part of the role. So the next one is low job control. So some examples of this are requiring permission or sign-off before progressing routine or low-risk tasks. So it kind of reflects a bit from the last one we spoke about. Level of autonomy, which is not based on the individual's skills or experience. So if you've got someone who's quite skilled and got a high level of experience, but they don't have an appropriate level of autonomy to go with that, that can cause stress and troubles. Prescriptive processes not allowing the use of skill or judgment. So again, if you've got very, very controlled or rigid procedures and ways of doing things that don't allow people to really utilise their skills or their judgment. Lack of consultation, so being essentially pigeonholed into something, not being able to discuss changes, different ways of doing things. Limited scope to adapt the way that work is performed. Little influence on how work is performed. Employees unable to avoid dealing with aggression or abuse. You often see this in call centres. That can be a real challenge for people working in call centres. And no control over physical environment. So, for example, working in uncomfortable temperatures, it can actually be a thing. If you've got a range of different people working in an open plan office, and some people might struggle with it being really cold, some people might struggle with it being really hot. That's a very real thing to consider because it affects the way that you show up and perform and feel about your job and what you're doing. Some control measures you can think about or put in place about this. So for the job and work design, make sure that the autonomy is matched to the skill design, the skills and the design of the systems and processes also match the skills of the employees. With the physical work environment, give more control and allow for an alteration to a pace of the work. Some people might work really quickly at some things, others may not so. Change the tasks or add pauses in between repetitive tasks and allow adjustments of workstations. So that kind of comes more into the physical side of things. But, you know, if people need a standing desk, if they need to be up and down, if they need maybe to spend some time in a private office, if you have one available, if they struggle with the noise of the office, again, if it's open plan, that can be a problem, or the heat challenges. Improve job control, consult with your workers, consider change of work hours or processes, have regular team meetings and monitoring of staff that's not excessive or punitive. So fair monitoring of staff, not looking over people's shoulders. Some safe work systems and procedures. So you want to encourage employees to raise any concerns and suggest changes, and also look at your leadership styles, making sure that they are supportive of these things happening. And of course, for the worker, it's really important that you recruit workers with the right mix of skills and experience for the particular job, but also the workplace. Poor support. So what this can look like is insufficient, unclear or contradictory information coming down the chain from leadership or management, not having the things to do the job properly or on time, or the things that they need to complete the job. Poorly maintained or inadequate tools or equipment, and IT can come into that. IT can be a real challenge in some workplaces, and it does come under the title of poor job support. It can create a lot of stress and frustration for people. I've been in that particular boat myself. Supervisors unavailable or unable to make decisions or provide support. That can be a real challenge if your supervisors or your managers are struggling with their own workloads. That can have a trickle-down effect. Inadequate guidance or inability to ask for help, so not having the process and procedures around them or knowing the best way to ask for help. A culture that discourages helping each other, environments that discourage discussion, and infrequent or poor performance feedback and discussions. So some control measures for this one with the job and work design. Make sure you've got really good information sharing systems in place. Allow time for supervisors to support their team, so ensure that that is considered as part of their workload. And also have clear management structures and regular feedback opportunities for your staff, whether they're formal or informal. Just make sure that they're a regular thing that happen. With the physical work environment, ensure that you're providing the tools, equipment and systems required to perform the roles adequately. And again, also ensure that there are adequate access to supervisors. If someone's unavailable or offline or struggling with their own workload, Who's the next person that people can go to? Make sure that you do have some backups in place. Improve job control, so regular team meetings, a culture of collaboration, and set clear work goals. Some safe work systems and procedures. So again, training, communication, support your team to develop positive working relationships, like asking for help. Make that a thing that regularly happens. And for your workers, it's important to ensure that your supervisors do have the skills to support their teams. You need to establish inductions for the worker, but also for supervisors, making sure that they are right across what's required. And training and mentoring for new employees is really, really important and valuable. So lack of role clarity. So some examples are unclear, inconsistent, or frequently changing job roles or responsibilities. Overlap in responsibilities can be a really, really big challenge. Conflicting expectations or changing standards. So whether that's coming down from a particular person like the business owner, or if it's you've got different supervisors who have different expectations and changing standards. If you can make something more uniform, that can be really helpful. Unclear or changing reporting lines. So again, if someone's sick or away, making sure that people know exactly where to go next. Missing or incomplete task information. So making sure your processes and procedures are up to date. And a lack of clarity about work priorities. Now, this is a really important one. I actually meet with my CEO regularly to find out what's current on the table, what is really important, and that helps me modify my work plan for my week. So I know, it might be that some tasks need to go up in priority, some need to fall back in priority. It's really, really important that your staff are clear about what is happening and if there are any changes, because again, that can affect your expectations of them and what's being produced or done in the workplace. So some control measures around this with job and work design: provide position descriptions that include key tasks, responsibilities, role expectations, clear reporting lines, and a single immediate supervisor. With the physical work environment, make sure that the workplace is compatible with the role and responsibility and that the systems and tools are appropriate for the jobs. Hopefully you're starting to see a bit of a theme coming through here. Improve role clarity. So clear work instructions, review tasks or processes that create any confusion, ensure systems are in place to help employees understand your expectations. So there's a communication thing that I often use when I'm doing communication training, which talks about making sure that people understand why things need to be done a certain way, because if they understand why, then it makes it much easier for them to follow through and do those things that way. Safe work systems and procedures ensure employees understand the role and encourage feedback or questions to clarify their role. And for the worker, ensure that the job description is an accurate reflection of the role. So again, way back at the recruitment phase, make sure that you do spend adequate time on that. It's a very important part of the process. Poor change management. Now, some examples are poorly planned, communicated, supported, and managed changes to the business. Not consulting with workers, not considering work health and safety implications of changes, poor or insufficient communication about the changes, inadequate support or training for your employees with regard to the change, and lack of clarity about the changes and the reasons for the changes. So what I just mentioned about the communication. When people understand why, they're much more likely to follow through with what you need them to do. So some control measures to help with that are consult with workers affected and plan the changes to duties and tasks. So it might be that you have a rolling introduction. Just make sure everyone knows what is going to happen and when. Make sure there's practical support available for the changes and there's information or feedback sessions. You can provide formal updates to your team, inform customers and suppliers as required, give reasons for the change again, and provide emotional support to help with any challenges or frustrations that may arise from particular changes. With your systems and procedures, you want to engage workers in updating their position descriptions and processes, so get your team involved. You need a good consultation process for them to be able to raise issues, concerns or suggestions, and also make sure that you respect different responses to change. Not everyone copes well with change, so taking that into consideration and thinking about the different challenges that might be thrown up in the process and addressing them as individuals. And for the worker, make sure there's plenty of information, training, instruction, and supervision to respond to the change. Inadequate reward or recognition. So this is one that lots of small business owners fall into, and sole traders, and I have myself as a small business owner. And, you know, again, as a sole trader or even when the business owner achieves something, it's really important that we do stop and recognise achievements, even if they're our own, and provide recognition for that. So some examples are an imbalance between worker effort and recognition and rewards, both formal and informal. A thank you goes a really long way. Unfair negative feedback, insufficient feedback or recognition, unfair distribution of recognition and rewards, limited opportunities for development, and also not recognising a worker's skills. So what that can look like is micromanaging people when it's really not required. And some control measures you can put in place. Ensure you use fair and transparent ways of providing recognition and rewards. Make sure that you know who was involved, who did what, and why in the system of things, so you can name those people up. Provide recognition or feedback promptly. So don't wait until weeks or months after the thing has happened. Make it occur as quickly as you can to the implementation or the change or whatever it is that's happened, the feedback that's been received from customers or clients. Make sure it's specific, fair, practical, and related to performance, and consult with workers when considering reward and recognition. There's nothing worse than someone who gets quite embarrassed by public recognition being made a huge deal of. It is important to check in with the person to make sure that they're going to be comfortable with what you're going to do. And that can just be a simple off-the-cuff conversation. It doesn't have to be a formal process. So as far as systems and procedures, develop your leader's ability to provide constructive feedback and recognise good performance. If you're the manager, if you're the business owner and the manager, develop your own ability to provide constructive feedback and recognise good performance. It's a really, really important skill to have. Ensure performance management systems focus on aspects that are in the control of the employee. You don't want to performance manage them on something that's beyond their control. That's not fair. They can't make changes to that. Train supervisors or yourself on performance management conversations and prioritise improvement over blame. So look at what can be improved over what went wrong. And for the worker, make sure that you implement systems that support their performance. So another one is poor organisational justice. So this can happen, it might sound like it's a thing that affects larger organisations, but it also can happen in a small business context. So some examples are lack of procedural fairness. If someone puts in a complaint and they don't feel it's been followed through on in the way it should be, or in the way that is documented in a process or procedure that it should be. Having performance discussions in front of others or using information for a purpose it was not disclosed for. So if you're having performance discussions, anything like that, don't do it in an open plan office. Do it in a private setting. And remember, if you're emailing a staff member about a performance issue, stop and think. Some businesses have a generic email account that all their staff can access. Don't do it over that forum because anyone could come across that email. Again, make sure that it is in a private forum. Unfair or inconsistently applied policies or procedures. Penalising workers for things outside of their control. Not applying policies fairly to some groups. Failing to appropriately address underperformance, inappropriate behaviour or misconduct. Allocating work, shifts or opportunities in an unfair way, or having no process for making decisions affecting workers. So control measures to have in place for this are transparent work processes. Document them, have them available for all to see, and also make sure that you consult with your workers on them. Ensure private places for sensitive conversations, as I mentioned, and that your workplace accommodates reasonable needs of workers. Provide mechanisms to report issues, raise concerns or appeal workplace decisions. Review workplace processes and policies to ensure that they are fair, and communicate processes and information to workers in a timely way and protect workers who raise concerns. And encourage workers to raise concerns early. Ensure there's an understanding of expectations and work targets and merit-based decisions. Harmful behaviours. So this is quite an obvious one. So in this category, we're talking about violence and aggression, bullying, harassment, including sexual or gender-based harassment, and conflict or poor workplace relationships and interactions. So some control measures you can take for this are ensure that you have good security in the area, that you have access to people and security, that there's visibility. It might be that you have signs up and things, or that there are no sort of corners where people can hide where these behaviours might be taking place. And you want to establish an environment in which these behaviours don't happen, essentially. So as far as your systems and procedures, communication, have all the open communication streams, all the examples we've talked about so far, have very clear procedures on what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, and how the unacceptable behaviour is managed. Provide information and training policies. There's lots of information available out there, and I'll share with you some places you can go to get that. And that includes, there's posters you can have up around your workplace, and regular reviews. So if these things do happen, or if there are concerns raised by your staff, make sure you regularly review these concerns. Have any control measures we've put in place fix the problem, or do we need to look at some other options? Are they not quite hitting the target? So bullying and harassment actually deserve their own focus because they're both common and commonly misunderstood. So one point I want to highlight is that individuals will perceive behaviours very differently. So what one person experiences as a direct management style, another may actually experience as bullying. And it's management styles, it's communication styles. There's lots of different ways in which people interact that some people might be fine with, whereas other people might not be okay with the exact same behaviour. So that's not an excuse for poor behaviour. It's a reason why you need clear policies and why it's important to train your people on what acceptable behaviour looks like, and to have a genuine process for raising and responding to complaints. So one thing just to bear in mind is that a policy that exists but nobody knows about, or that isn't followed when tested, is worse than useless. It can actually create legal exposure for your business. So it's really important. And just before we move on, one thing that you can do if you do need to have a review of your policies and procedures, or you're listening to this going, oh, maybe we haven't made this as clear, or if on induction you've just essentially provided your workers with a folder of policies and procedures, a really good way of getting around that and opening up conversation about that is at each staff meeting that you have, just have a standing item on policies and procedures and talk about one each meeting. We're actually going through that at the TCCI at the moment. Each staff meeting, our workplace relations consultant, who's a member of our staff, is reviewing a policy, bringing it to the meeting to talk about it, have a discussion about it, and then we've got space to provide feedback. She puts it out before the meeting, and we have options to provide feedback either prior to the meeting or post-meeting once there's been some discussion around it. So if you're kind of going, oh no, how do I handle this? That can be a really good way of handling that with your staff and making them feel included in the process. So this is a model that I also really like to use a lot in training. I use it in communication training, leadership training. I pretty much try and squeeze it into any kind of training that I do. So it's a really useful way to think about personal responsibility in the workplace. So above the line behaviours are things like taking ownership, being accountable, and asking what you can do differently. Whereas below the line behaviours are things like blame, denial, and making excuses. So the reason this matters and is important for psychosocial hazards is that culture exists in whichever one of these is normalised in your workplace. And your leaders, managers, or again, if it's just a business owner with a very small team, they're the ones that set the tone. So if leadership is consistently below the line in the way that you're speaking and approaching things in the workplace, that's going to filter through to your staff and your workplace culture. So to wrap up, psychosocial hazards are now firmly within the scope of your work health and safety obligations, and they're increasingly showing up in workers' compensation claims, which are expensive, disruptive, and often preventable. And they've found that the claims relating to psychological injury, for want of a better term, are the ones that do tend to go on the longest and are the most expensive. So it really is important that you consider all of these things in trying to reduce your risk of workplace, of workers' compensation claims. But the good news is that the controls that we've talked about are largely common sense. They're well documented and they're actually quite achievable without a large team or a budget. So if we look across all the hazard categories, you've noticed that these same themes kept appearing: consultation, training, support, communication, consistent application of policies, and capable leadership. So none of these are complicated concepts, but they do require deliberate effort. And the businesses that manage psychosocial risk well, they're not necessarily doing anything exotic or over the top. What they're doing are the basics consistently. So I'm going to say that again. You want to do the basics consistently. And that's really good news for our smaller businesses, because it means you don't need a large HR department to do this well. You just need commitment and follow through. So that said, where can you go for help? If you are feeling overwhelmed and like this is a big hill to climb, don't panic. There is actually a lot of funded, so free to you, assistance available. So the first thing I'm going to mention, Employer of Choice Assist, that is funded by our wonderful state government, and it's a free confidential service for businesses with 20 or fewer full-time employees, and it offers one-on-one support to improve workplace culture, strengthen your HR practices, and you can also access tools and templates to build on your capacity internally. The TCCI run Employer of Choice Assist, and my colleague Matt actually helps businesses put a lot of these processes and write the procedures and all that sort of thing. So it's a free service. If you're eligible, please reach out. Business Tasmania can help to connect you, or you can come to the TCCI directly. But it's absolutely a great program, and we see really great things coming out of that. Another option for you is One Safe Tasmania. So these guys are funded by the Work Cover Board in Tasmania to provide small and medium businesses with up to 5 hours of free advice, assistance, and coaching per calendar year. So they're specialists essentially in work health and safety things, including psychosocial risks and hazards. So you can contact them via their website, or again, reach out to Business Tasmania for further information. WorkSafe Tasmania have lots of information and resources to help employers understand and manage their psychosocial hazard responsibilities. So you can go to their website. And also the Fair Work Ombudsman, if you go to their website and search for health and wellbeing, it brings up a list of resources to support both employees and small business owners directly with their mental health and wellbeing. So it's got some support lines that you can contact, and there are a few different programs available. So if you or your staff are struggling, like I said, go to the Fair Work Ombudsman's website and just do a search for health and wellbeing, and they've got a great list of resources there. So I want to leave you with something really concrete, because with all I've talked about today, it could seem very big and overwhelming. So I'm going to set you a challenge. What I would really like you to do is pick one of these things and do it tomorrow. So your options are: walk through your workplace and pay attention to what you actually see and hear. So not with your manager or business owner hat on. I want you to think of it like you've got your risk hat on. Are people's heads down and they're flat out doing their work with no breathing space? Is there any tension you're picking up on between team members that nobody seems to be addressing? This is your data for where it might be a good place for you to start. Your second option is pull out your work health and safety documentation and honestly ask yourself, does a psychosocial hazard policy exist? And if so, does anyone actually know about it? The third one, have one genuine conversation with a team member about how they're finding their work. So it's not a performance chat. Let them know that you're not, criticizing or assessing how they're going in that respect. It's that you want to have a really human chat with the person about any challenges they might be experiencing or any problems that they're finding are coming up in their work environment as a whole. And you might be surprised what you learn. It might be something that's really simple that you hadn't thought of that has a simple fix. And finally, consider scheduling even a brief regular team check-in if you don't have one. So this could be your team meeting. You could make it part of your team meeting if you do have regular ones, or if not, and again at TCCI we did this, we used to have a weekly 15-minute staff check-in where everyone just jumped on, said what they were working on, Our CEO or COO had the opportunity to talk about any priorities that they had, so the rest of us could adjust our workloads appropriately. And you talk about what we did was talk about if we had any capacity. So if I had some things to do, but I actually had some space, so I could help out another team member who was struggling. Or if you needed help, to put your hand up and say, I've got this deadline, I'm really struggling to meet it. If someone's got space to take on X, that'd be really helpful. So the single biggest predictor of unaddressed psychosocial risk in small business is the absence of a feedback loop between staff and leadership. So even just having a small 15-minute meeting weekly can make all the difference. And the reason that we had that weekly, we don't do it now because all of us are in the office one day a week, so we can have that conversation in real time. But the reason we had it as a very specific time before was because we did have a lot of staff. We had staff in the north of the state and people working from home. So it can just be a really great way to take the temperature of where everyone's at, and for owners or leaders to identify any potential emerging problems as well. So these are just small actions, but they signal to your team that this stuff is important and that it matters to you. And that alone can change the culture in your workplace. So I know it's been a lot of information, but if anyone's got any questions, I would love to hear them. I don't know if there've been any while I've been chatting, Bron.
We haven't got any in the chat at the moment, but if anyone does have a question, pop it in the chat. Otherwise, we'll end the recording in a moment and then you can unmute and ask your question.
I might just address two questions that were brought up prior to this webinar. So someone asked the question, how can businesses best support an employee returning to work after an injury or illness? And what might a thoughtful, structured return to work plan look like in a small business context? So that's a fantastic question. However, it's very situation specific, the answer. And essentially what you would need to do is discuss it with the return to work coordinator or the case manager, and also your insurer. So a lot of information about workplace relation claims, returning to work, all that sort of thing, your insurer will have the information and the resources to provide you with the information that you need and to support you through that process. So they should always be your first stop for any specific questions. And there was also a question about the gap between an employer's wage obligations and when workers' compensation coverage steps in, and how businesses can plan for that. So again, it's a very specific question, and it's really important that you ask your insurer about that, because they've done this a million times. They're going to have the information for you.
Fantastic. So they were the two questions, Mikala. We didn't have any others pre-event, did we? No, beautiful. All right. Well, I do love the idea of taking one small action to make a big difference. So I hope you've all decided what you're going to do tomorrow or even this afternoon to make a big difference in your workplace culture. But thank you everyone for joining us. Feel free to hang around if you're live on the call to ask a question. Otherwise, we'll end the recording there and see you in the next event.